I have been an educator for over 12 years, and honestly, let me tell you, ChatGPT is going to be an absolute game changer. Like everyone else, I don't know whether to be terrified or super excited. I think a bit of both. I think it's going to be insanely good in the short term and then wipe out all of our jobs in the long term. But we'll see. And I want to show you some of the reasons why this is so crazy. And I'm going to start with how it can understand a question with very limited context. These questions, for example, come from the GRE and GMAT, which are graduate level exams. So you can imagine what it could do with a high school question. The question is this. I've put number 2, and I didn't even tell it number 1, but it's fine with that. And I didn't even tell what type of question it was to ChatGPT. It just understood the context. The question was from the GRE, I believe. In parts of the Arctic, the land grades into the landfast ice so that you can walk off the coast and not know you were over the hidden sea. I didn't tell it that it had to fill in the blank. It realized that it did. Of course, it knew what all the words meant. And not only did it know the correct answer is imperceptibly, which means you don't know what's going on. Remember, it said, we don't know that we're over the hidden sea. Anyway, I have to switch off tutoring mode. I'm not here to teach you today. I'm here to show you that not only did it know the correct answer, it was able to give a decent explanation for why that was the correct answer. It said the sentence describes a situation where the land gradually transitions into the ice, such that someone walking it would not be able to tell they're over the hidden sea. The adverb, giving you extra information here, telling you what category of word imperceptibly is, gives the definition, which is perfect, and tells you the letter choice answer, choice B. And one thing you might be thinking is, oh, it's just trawled the internet, found the answer and regurgitated it. Well, first of all, it doesn't have access to data from the internet more recent than I think 2021. And second of all, I checked the answers on the internet. They weren't phrased in the same way. Neither the official answers nor what people have put out on the internet. So it has crafted this answer on its own, and I can prove that with some of the other questions I'm going to show you. So this is its own answer and it's correct. But that's the first point of 5 that I want to make. It understood what question I was asking without me fully telling it what to do. Let's look at another example. This is a harder question because there are 2 answer choices it has to pick and both of them work to fill in the blank. But then after you see the answer, I'm going to ask it something and I think you really will be mind blown. And as an educator, I was mind blown, and anyone watching this who's in education, check out the reply to my reply coming up in a second. Anyway, here's the question, and you have to pick 2 answer choices that both fit in to the missing blank. And they don't have to be synonyms, but they have to convey generally the same meaning. Very quickly, the sentence says, although it does contain some pioneering ideas, one would hardly characterize the work as. So we're contrasting with pioneering ideas, giving the answers A and E, which ChatGPT, you won't be surprised, got right. And you might be thinking, that's fine, that's what it did in the last one. Well, first of all, that was a harder question. There were 2 answers this time, and they weren't perfect synonyms, but it still got it right. But yeah, okay, that's similar to the last question. But look what happens now. I read the explanation, and I pretended to be a student. And a student might ask me, well, but pioneering means original. It means being first. So why isn't the answer original, C? So that's why I asked. I said, but I thought that pioneering meant original. That's the kind of question a student might ask. Not a perfect question, not fully formulated, conversational. I didn't write out, in this context, here's the question again, wouldn't pioneering be the answer? Or wouldn't original be the answer? No, I just asked it in a very natural way, assuming that ChatGPT already knew the context of the previous question. And it did, and explained, I think, really well why it wasn't the answer. Yes, pioneering can mean original or innovative. It didn't even say exactly meant, because it doesn't exactly mean that. It just said can mean, which is correct. However, in the context of the sentence, the work being described contains some pioneering ideas, but is not characterized as pioneering overall. Wow. In other words, while the work contains some original or innovative ideas, it is not groundbreaking or particularly innovative as a whole. And that is what is amazing about this technology for educators. I would say amazing in the short to medium term because students are going to be aided by this so much, particularly when it can iron out the kinks. And I'm going to show you in a second, it does sometimes get questions wrong and explains them confidently, even though it's wrong, and that's a problem currently. But imagine 3 to 5 years when it doesn't get questions wrong. That's going to really help students with their homework, and I know that's going to create its own problems in terms of people cheating. But forget homework, it's going to be a private tutor to millions of people, as long as it stays either free or virtually free. It will probably end up being government subsidized in many countries to be a private tutor for all. But that's my next point. If you're a private tutor, like me, you've got to look beyond that. You've got to look to 5 to 10 years from now, when it gets so good and can illustrate its points with diagrams and never ever makes mistakes, that eventually people will stop paying for private tutoring. And I can totally understand why. Yes, there will be some residual value in terms of a human connection, mentoring almost, but that's what we'll become, almost mentors rather than direct pedagogical tutors. Okay, I have one more example of an even more difficult question, and then I want to get onto math, and that's where it struggles. I tutor both math and verbal, and let's just say it's far less impressive with math currently, although you'd almost expect it to be better at math, right? But it's really not. It's better at verbal, maybe because it's a large language model, as it said. Anyway, let's go to a question here. So this was a sentence correction question from the GMAT. So it's testing the understanding of complex grammar. And this time I didn't even give it A, B, C, D, E. I just left it blank, wrote 5 options, and didn't say what the question was at all, gave no context about what it needed to do. The truth is it needed to pick which of these 5 versions reads the best, and it got it right. And this was counted, by the way, as a 700 to 800 level GMAT sentence correction question, which basically means, translated, that's the hardest type of question. Questions that generally even some really advanced students or possibly even some tutors would struggle with, and it got it right and explained it fairly well, I would say. Of course, if you didn't like the explanation, I'm sure I could have just typed in, explain it like I'm 5 years old or something, and it would have done the job really well. So anything to do with language, that's reasoning, that's grammar, can do extremely well at. One final proof of that is, what about a really long passage? And this is the type of thing that really scares students. We have 3 beefy paragraphs. I believe this is from the GMAT. And look how it handles the question. I give it the question, give it the options, and it nails it and really gives a decent explanation as to why. Of course, you can pause the video if you want to read and compare your answer, but I've checked it. It's a correct answer. The explanation is great. And again, I tried what I said earlier, which is, imagine I'm a student. I think it's E. What's the explanation? Why isn't the answer E? And it does a good job explaining why the answer isn't E. And that's the innovation that makes it different from so many other tools on the internet. You can read answers from forums and even using YouTube guides like mine, but then you won't be able to ask questions back. And this is what it can do. This is why it's a revolution. Okay, let's get on to some of its downsides, which basically are involving math. I did a few more examples and it got some earlier critical reasoning questions right. So I'm going to skip those. It did give very brief explanations and didn't really explain itself very well, but it got the questions right. So that's great. But here we go. Okay, let's do a few examples. This was a question about mixtures, and it really flopped hard. It really couldn't do it. The question is, a rabbit on a diet is fed only 300 grams of mixture of 2 foods, food X and food Y. Food X contains 10% protein, food Y contains 15% protein. If the rabbit's diet provides exactly 38 grams of protein daily, how many grams of food X are in the mixture? Now, I don't want to teach everyone this, because I'm sure you're watching this video to find out more about ChatGPT than about math. Suffice to say, what you might agree with me is this first couple of sentences are just math tragedies going on here. It's just completely wrong, and it sounds confident. Remember, our mixture is made up of food X, which is 10% protein, and food Y, which is 15% protein. So even if you don't like math too much, you know that our overall average is going to be somewhere between 10 and 15, depending on how much food X we have compared to food Y. If we have more so food X, the average is going to be closer to 10% protein. More so food Y, the average is going to be closer to 15% protein. but it actually adds the percentages. It says 10% protein for food X, 15% protein for food Y. Let's add those, okay, and get 25% protein overall. Completely incorrect generally, and even more incorrect specifically here, because we know it's not 25%. 25% of 300 is 75. And it tells us there's 38 grams of protein daily. So it's off on so many levels. Didn't just get the number wrong, completely got the concept wrong. And of course, the final answer is wrong because of that. 201.0526. I don't even want to know how it got that. You guys can figure that out. But completely off. And it's not just a one-off, unfortunately. It gets a lot of questions wrong. So I thought that this kind of basic algebra question, surely we get that right. There's no words to get in the way. But actually, I've realized that the more we stray from language and language processing, the worse it gets. So this is pure math, and it really does badly. It says, well, the question is x squared equals 2y cubed and 2y equals 4. What is the value of x squared plus y? Again, I'm not going to go into tutoring mode, but I think you guys can see that when it said since 2y equals 4, we can substitute 4 for 2y. Well, first of all, if 2y equals 4, which is what the question said, y equals 2. And it never even mentions that. In fact, it says since we don't know the value of y at the end. But we do know the value of y. You can work it out easily. Not that hard. Okay, the rest of the algebra is fairly challenging, but we need to know that y is 2 to get started, and it just doesn't do that. Not just that though. It doesn't just miss a fact. It confidently states something that's incorrect. It says that when you substitute 4 as 2y, you're supposed to cube the 4. And when we do that, you get 4 cubed, which is 64, and then you times it by 2. But that's wrong on so many levels. You don't cube the coefficient unless there's brackets. You would only cube the y here, not cube the 2 as well. So it's confidently telling you something that's wrong, and it still can't even get the answer right, even doing that incorrect operation. So I thought, okay, let's be fair. Let's make it even more clear. Let's try and go above and beyond. Let's put brackets around the y cubed to clearly separate it off, even though the question didn't do this. And instead of writing 2y equals 4, I'm going to tell it in clear words. 2 multiplied by y is 4. I even put the x squared in a bracket just so it wouldn't get confused. And it still completely got it wrong. It said since 2 multiplied by y is 4, we can substitute 4 for 2 multiplied by y. That's still incorrect because it's separated by a bracket now. It's even clearer that you can't do that. And again, never mentioned what y is. It said, since we don't know the value of y. I couldn't have made it clearer that y is 2 here. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I did another question on stocks. It completely got it wrong, didn't even come close, and confidently stated an incorrect answer here. I guess this is different because unlike the previous two, it gave a firm conclusion, therefore the total amount is. Actually, it did that for question 1 as well. So, in summary, I would say this is an insane step forward in terms of verbal tutoring, English tutoring. We're talking grammar, we're talking reading comprehension, we're talking critical reasoning, logic-based reading. Anything like that, huge step forward. Got to keep an eye on it. I have seen one question with verbal where it got it wrong, and again was confident. So it's not quite ready for the masses in terms of teaching kids maybe so that they can trust the results. It's not at that level. Maybe in 2, 3, 4 years, it will be at the level where it can be fully reliable for English, grammar, all of that kind of stuff. You can imagine kids interacting with it, asking it questions about characters in Dickens. Why were they motivated in this way? Obviously, a lot of children are going to use it to cheat. A lot of students of all ages are going to use it to cheat. But then maybe the word cheat is going to be redefined. What does it mean to cheat if they're getting the answer correct and that's what they're going to do in their adult lives? Some people will say that that's not even cheating anymore. Others will say they need to use their own minds to get good at stuff. So even though we can all Google answers, you're still supposed to be able to use your own reasoning. But my message to educators, including to myself, is be aware of this new technology because it's a game changer, particularly at the moment for language learning and complex English questions. But it is coming and it will get better at math. I've got no doubt about it. Probably within the year, there'll be a model that can answer these math questions very confidently and correctly. Obviously, there'll be a lag period where laws are updated, things are optimized, and awareness rises for this program and what it can do, I'm sure there's going to be a paywall, which eventually will get cheaper and cheaper with competition. But looking 5 to 10 years out, the world is going to be very, very different for educators. I know everyone else has talked about developers and artists, but this is my video about the possible impact on educators.